Okay, everyone, if we could all sit down again after that short break, I hope you're refreshed. I hope you grabbed some tea and are now ready for our next incredible speaker. Again, if you are here and you're using socials, it'd be great if you could tag Global DevSlam. It's at Global DevSlam on Instagram. I know that because I've used it many times today. And yeah, we'd love to see the kind of content that you're taking. So please do tag that tag and use the hashtags as well. So yes, I think let's get some more bums on the seats before we get going. Our next speaker, I'm going to give her a quick introduction. I hear her talk is amazing, so you don't want to miss this one for sure. So, our next speaker is called Adora Nwodo, and she is a cloud native, she's a software developer, and actually a multi-published author as well. She's going to talk a little bit about cloud native transformation and building better cloud optimized apps. Her official title is Senior Software Engineer, and she's actually also a founder. She's a founder at Nexus Scale, so I'm sure we're going to be hearing a little more about that. She also boasts a large following on socials and is active in the online community, so definitely reach out to her. She has over 200,000 followers on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So definitely check her out. Make sure to give her a follow, see what she's up to. And her handle is at Adora Nwodo, all one word, at Adora Nwodo. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Adora.
Hi, everyone. It's afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I feel like I'm speaking to... Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for... First of all, I want to give a huge shout out to the entire GITEX and DevSlam team because this is amazing. The entire conference has been amazing. And I'm sure it took a lot to put together something this big. So I'm giving a huge shout out to the team. Before I go on, today I'm going to be talking about powering modern cloud-native transformation. And I'm talking about this because I'm a person of the cloud. I love the cloud. I've been working in the cloud for almost 5 years. And that's the new part of technology I've decided to sort of make my own. And today, I've done a lot of things on the cloud, from SRE to DevOps to actually being what you would call a platform engineer, to teaching about the cloud, and now thinking about ways to better optimize the cloud. So today I'm going to be talking about things around that, using a particular technology that I really love and really love to talk about. And I'm going to be talking about a company called Nexabytes. It's a fictional company that I created in my head. I'm the founder. However, there are so many Nexabytes out there. If you think about the story I'm going to tell, you would see Nexabytes in a lot of all the enterprise companies that have recently evolved into new generation companies today, or even the new companies that have come up. You would see Nexabytes in Coca-Cola. You would see Nexabytes in Netflix. You would see Nexabytes in Uber. And I'm hoping that the company you work at or the company you are building can also relate to this story that I'm about to tell. Nexabyte was a traditional organization that had been a dominant player in the software industry for decades, maybe in the 90s, right, but not in the present 2000s. However, their business was at crossroads, facing challenges that threatened their very existence. They had monolithic applications, and their legacy infrastructure hindered their ability to respond to customer demands and market shifts. And their competitors were releasing features and updates at a pace that Nexabyte could not match. And obviously, as a result of that, their customer satisfaction was declining, and they were on the verge of losing key clients. There's so many times over the years that we've seen this happen. If we go from the late 1990s to the early 2000s, to the early 2010s to now, there have been companies that were dominant players then, but somehow couldn't keep up with the pace and lost customers. Some came back and they've grown now. Some are still down and we don't know if they will ever come back up. So it goes back to the point I was making about seeing Nexabytes in every single tech company around you. You don't have to look too far. But at least on the bright side, Nexabytes wanted to do something about it. They recognized the need for a drastic transformation, and they decided to embark on a journey to embrace cloud-native development because everybody was doing it. And they also wanted to have that competitive advantage that they seemed to have lost. They understood that this was their last opportunity to save that business, and they started thinking of a way to modernize their technology stack. And in the process, these are some of the things they thought about. How do we integrate the microservices architecture into the technology that we build? If we're doing microservices, then we also have to think about containerization, and we have to think about a way to do orchestration as well. We have to think about Docker, we have to think about Kubernetes, we have to think about these things. We need to automate our deployments, and we can't do manual deployments anymore. We can't segregate dev and ops anymore. So we need to add our CI/CD pipeline into the things we do. We need to also optimize our cost because in this new world, if we're trying to maintain high availability and high reliability, we might spend so much money we don't need to spend if we do it the wrong way. So we need to think about serverless too. We need to make sure that we also have available apps all the time, reliable and available apps. We need to invest in SRE teams, site reliability engineering teams. We need to invest in on-call engineers. We need to invest in observability and monitoring. And we need to think about scalability. Whether we're scaling up, we're scaling out. How are we handling the demand to customer traffic so that we give our customers the best possible experience that they need? These are the things they had to think about. And they went on to do it. Luckily for them, the transformation was remarkable. And Nexabytes had not only saved their business, but they had also rejuvenated it. Their deployment and operations teams were more aligned, and they were working seamlessly together, and they had somehow now adopted that DevOps culture, and it was doing well for them. They could now release updates and features a lot faster than before, and their customers noticed the difference their products had, and that their products were more stable, responsive, and they were always up to date. This led to higher customer satisfaction, increase in their client base because of word of mouth, and a rise in revenue. Pulumi was a part of Nexabytes' transformational journey, and Pulumi is exactly what I'm going to be talking to you about today. And I'm going to tell you how Nexabytes was able to use Pulumi to get that cloud-native transformation that they need. But before I get right to it, I want to do a brief introduction of myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Adora, and I'm a senior software engineer, currently working at the intersection of cloud infrastructure and developer platforms. So I can relate to the previous talk, actually. I'm also a Pulumi community engineer, so I currently work to help build the Pulumi community. Pulumi is a product I love so much, and I want to see it grow to the ends of the earth, basically. I'm an award-winning tech woman, recognized in different countries, in different continents, all around the world, and I'm a global speaker. I counted how many talks I had given earlier this year in March, and I realized that I had spoken at over 120 conferences in the last 3 years. By now, we should be a lot more because between March and September, or rather March and October, I've done a lot more conferences as well. I'm an ecosystem advocate. Someone called me that last year, and I liked the name, so I decided to keep it. And I love tech, community, education, and music. I'm also the author of 2 cloud engineering books, Cloud Engineering for Beginners, which was the first book I released in 2021, and Beginning Azure DevOps, which I released earlier this year in April. And they're both on Amazon, just in case you want to check them out. So yeah, cloud-native computing is an approach in software development that utilizes cloud computing to build and run scalable applications in modern dynamic environments, such as the public, private, hybrid, and federal clouds. Cloud-native computing, the key thing about cloud-native computing here is the fact that it's focusing on optimizing the cloud experience. And if we think about where we're coming from, especially in Nexabytes' case, there were a lot of things that needed to happen. There were legacy systems, and they had to come to terms with finding a way to optimize those systems and make them better. Moving from that monolithic approach to the microservices approach. There was the cultural shift that needed to happen, because when you have developers working in isolation, testers working in isolation, ops teams working in isolation, you need to create that new culture to bring them all together. There was the complexity as well, because they are used to deploying things a lot in heavy chunks, as opposed to going over deployments faster, more frequently, at a more frequent cadence, meaning that they deploy smaller things in smaller chunks. And there was also the security and compliance bit about it, because to be honest, especially since after COVID, everything has been living on the cloud. And the cloud is pretty much the internet. It's just a fancy way of calling it the internet. The truth is, if you don't secure your resources on the internet, somebody else is going to take it and make it their own. Right? So security has become a very important thing now more than ever. And these were the challenges that Nexabytes had to face and go through. When you're thinking about cloud-native development, there are some key principles that you have to think about. And some of them are, actually the 4 of them, the most important ones: microservices, containers, DevOps, and scalability. Microservices allow you to have single responsibility services that do one thing, as opposed to having like large monolithic applications. And the amazing thing about microservices over, like the advantage of microservices over monoliths, is the fact that you are able to isolate the different functionalities. Meaning that, for example, if whatever is happening in your organization, the system for, let's use social media, right? The system for commenting is down. So you can't add comments, you can't read comments. It doesn't mean you can't like posts. It doesn't mean you can't create a new post. And possibly the team in charge of getting the commenting functionality back would stabilize it. But imagine in a situation where everything was in one place, and if the commenting system is down, the entire system is down. And it goes back to what we were talking about in terms of availability and stability. In the cloud, we use nines as a way to talk about availability. And every company's dream is to at least have 5 to 6 nines. 5 nines meaning you are available 99.999 of the time, right? But what happens when you have only 1 9? Meaning that you only have 90% availability. That's pretty bad. And if you think about the cloud the way you think about power, if you think about the cloud the way you think about water or internet services, if you are an addict of your phone, like me, I'm always on my phone. I love my phone. I love Instagram. I love TikTok. I love Twitter. And I'm always on social media. So imagine if I couldn't use the internet for 3 hours in a day. I would feel it so much. So now imagine if people were not able to use your service for up to 3 hours in a day because you had low availability, which is 1 9. They will feel it so much. And adopting the microservices architecture helps you with that. Containers as well. Right, with containers, you are easily able to ship and make your apps more portable. You can package the applications, all the dependencies, and everything you need into a container, and you ship it. Thank you, Docker. But yes, you can do that now. And we think about DevOps as well as the entire culture. When I think about DevOps, it's not a role, it's more a cultural thing. It's how you set up your organization to be able to do everything else that I'm going to talk about. It's how you set up your organization to have high availability. It's how you set up your organization to make sure that they monitor things and they catch things early enough and they fix them. It's how you set up your organization to be able to automate your pipelines as well, your code deployments, your infra deployments too. And when we're thinking about scalability, it's how you think about not only scaling up but also scaling down. Because imagine if you could scale up and let's say you have a service where it's Christmas coming up and you sell pajamas, right? It's something that happens on social media. People are always posting pajama pictures during Christmas. And last year, you scaled up your infrastructure because you had so many orders. And then in April, you couldn't scale back down. And you are paying for a lot of cloud services that you are not using. That's crazy. So when you're thinking about scalability, you scale up and you scale down as well. And this is something that when you are doing cloud native development, and you're going through the cloud native approach and making sure you are building more cloud optimized apps, these are things you think about. And the truth is, you need to do these different things with different tools. So how can you make it easy for your team? I'm here to tell you that there is something that I love so much called Pulumi that can help you do everything more seamlessly, and it can accelerate your cloud native transformation. Pulumi is an open source infrastructure as code tool, or rather, Pulumi says that it is an open source infrastructure as code tool, but I think it's a lot more. Because apart from doing infrastructure as code, there's a lot more you can do with Pulumi. You can do policy as code declarations with Pulumi. So meaning that you can do security on the cloud with Pulumi. And I think I should write another book about this, hoping that people would read it. But I believe that policy as code is the right way to actually test your infrastructure. But that's another story for another day. And this is also another feature Pulumi gives you, but I'm not going to be talking about that in this talk today. I'm more focused on how you can use this tool to better optimize your cloud processes. And I'm going to start with talking about multi-cloud and hybrid cloud support that Pulumi gives you. So it supports like so many cloud providers. The popular ones, you know, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Alibaba Cloud, Oracle, and a lot other ones as well. For the first time 3 weeks ago, I built a front-end app and I deployed it to Vercel using Pulumi. I had no idea I could do that before. And there's so many other things that it can do that I probably don't even know about today, but it's worth checking out. It's versatile for multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments, and it aligns with the cloud-native principle of flexibility, right? When we're thinking about the cloud-native approach, vendor locking is a problem. You don't want to depend so heavily on one provider, right? And if you are able to integrate into a solution that gives you multi-cloud support, then why not? If we're also talking about IAC and DevOps, that's like Pulumi's core focus. It allows organizations to define their infrastructure using code. And this code-driven approach is making it easy for people with software engineering experience to contribute to infrastructure automation. I am primarily a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for 7 years. But I have software engineering experience. I know some languages. I write C#, I write TypeScript, Java, Go, Python. And I'm able to use these other languages to do infrastructure automation. 5 years ago, if somebody told me to come and do DevOps, where I'm going to be seeing a lot of bash scripts, I would run away, to be honest. But right now, I can do it today because this tool made it easy for me to start. I started using Pulumi as far back as 2019, and I've never looked back ever since. It streamlines your infrastructure provisioning and management. It promotes agility and consistency. And these are key aspects in cloud-native development. It supports the principles of DevOps by enabling automated infrastructure management. So you are able to automate all your IAC things with Pulumi. And as I was talking about earlier, I said that you can use Pulumi, real programming languages, integrating with Pulumi to actually manage your application infrastructure. And this is a Pulumi script for how you would manage a Kubernetes namespace and a Kubernetes deployment. I did not have to do anything with kubectl, it's not my business. I did not have to do anything in any other terminal, and I just have to focus on using Pulumi to manage Kubernetes for me, and it can do that 100%. Microservices and container orchestration is another thing. Pulumi integrates seamlessly with container orchestration platforms like Kubernetes, which I just showed you, and these platforms are key players in the cloud-native ecosystem. Integrating with Pulumi to make container orchestration more accessible helps to simplify the deployment of containerized applications across various environments. Pulumi also helps with CI/CD, and you can integrate Pulumi into your CI/CD pipelines. This can automate the deployment of your infrastructure and your applications. I did a workshop a couple of hours ago, and I showed people how you could use that to deploy your infra, and beyond deploying your infra, also deploy your apps as well. I didn't need to build the application or do anything like that. I wrote the code, and Pulumi built the application and did the deployment for me. It was a serverless app that we built during that workshop. And this is something that it can do for you. And with this, teams can actually achieve rapid development, and deployment cycles can be faster. And this is a characteristic of cloud native practices at the end of the day. We've talked about scalability. Speed is also something. Flexibility is also something. And this is a typical example, right? Obviously for a very basic app, but this is a typical example of how you would integrate Pulumi into your CI/CD pipeline if you ever had to do it. Infrastructure as code is helping teams build better cloud-optimized apps. And this is because your configurations are specified in code, so you build these things the same way you treat your IAC, the same way you treat your code. You can test it, you can version it, you can roll back. Apart from automation, which is the major selling point at the end of the day. And you can also use transferable skills from programming. Imagine working in a small business where you didn't have the funds to hire many people, but you have engineers that are very good at what they do, full-stack engineers that know how to use TypeScript and Python. And you obviously had to start doing some infrastructure automation to manage the infrastructure of the products you were building. They can use their transferable programming skills, and to be honest, this is how I started in 2019. And they can use these transferable programming skills to build cloud-optimized apps. And beyond everything that I've said, there are other best practices for building these apps. And the first one I will talk about is that you should prioritize observability and empower your SRE teams. And I've said this thing online before, that I don't think building the software is the hardest part. I think it's the easiest part. Maintaining that software and making sure that it performs optimally at scale is the hardest part. When you have to think about scaling up infrastructure, scaling out, do you want to do scaling rules using the typical approach that you would do in IAC, or do you want to leverage container orchestration and you want to make Kubernetes do that for you? When you want to think about empowering your on-call teams, integrating tools that make people respond faster to incidents when they see them. Because I don't know how many people remember when Facebook was down last year, it was a big deal. And the last thing you want is for your company to be trending on the internet because of you and your team as a manager. So one thing you want to do, if you are talking about optimizing better for the cloud, is to prioritize observability and empower these teams so that we even see these things from a mile away when they're coming. And it's not only about monitoring the apps that the customers are using. Sometimes you can make calls to, you can create runners, for example, or other ways to simulate API calls periodically so that sometimes you can even catch problems before they are actually problems that the customers are facing. Whether it's performance problems, security problems, or any other kind of problem. Another practice is to isolate your development, testing, and production environments to prevent unintended changes or issues in production. This can mean, in the context of Azure, because I know Azure pretty well, this can mean using different Azure subscriptions for your different environments. You don't want to use the same subscription you use in production, the one your customers are using. You want it to be different from the one that everybody is using to test and figure out things. This can also mean using something like a different Kubernetes namespace because you want to create that isolation for yourself and for your team. Implementing zero trust security models as well, because you don't want to ever assume trust, because you don't want to ever assume anything. So you want to add strict access controls and enforce them at every level so that people don't have more access than they need. Because like I said, everything is on the internet and security is becoming a very big deal because attackers are everywhere. So you don't want your business to fall prey to that. And that's also something worth optimizing when you are thinking about cloud native transformation and optimizing your business or your products better for the cloud. Documentation is also very important. You don't want to be the new joiner in a team where there are 8 people that have been working together for 3 years and they have so much context and somehow a bunch of things they work on are not documented. As a new joiner, you would struggle if you were that person. And if you were that new joiner, eventually, when you get a hang of things, maybe you should be the one documenting things. Maybe that can be the first impact that you make in the team when you join them. But it helps people when you think about API documentation, architectural diagrams, instructions for developers and operators. Hey, this is how you do this. This is how you set this up. This is how you run this. It helps everyone. And you can also use cloud-native tools to monitor and optimize costs. Because like I said earlier, imagine being the owner of the pajamas business in April, and you were not properly optimizing your cloud costs. Now, you have so much cloud costs to pay for, and you didn't really make any sales, because in April, nobody's really buying Christmas pajamas, if we're being honest. Right? So you want to also make sure that you're using these cloud-native tools to monitor and to optimize these costs as well. If you want to learn more about Pulumi, which I was talking about in this session, you can go through this website. You can go to their website, go to the Pulumi docs, get started. It's pretty easy to get started. I started using Pulumi in 2019, and I never took a course on Pulumi because the docs was a course in itself. It is that well documented. So I'd advise you to check it out if you are interested, if you'd like to. And I also want to quickly show you something called Pulumi AI. So there's some people that might not know how to code, or might want to get into cloud native and using all of these things and infrastructure automation and things like that, but you don't necessarily know how to code. Pulumi has a tool called Pulumi AI, and this tool can help you. Like, I can go to Pulumi AI and tell Pulumi AI that I want an Azure function that does something for me, and it will literally spit out the code like it just did here. So if you are trying to learn, this is a fast way for you to learn, get the code, and actually read it to understand what's going there, especially maybe when you are not a programmer coming from a purely 100% DevOps background, or you are even new into programming, but you want to learn like a bunch of all these things. At this point, I'm actually done with my talk. Thank you, everyone. I don't know if there are any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Yes, amazing. I love questions. If you could introduce yourself as well, that'd be great.
I'm Ali, and a Python developer. And first of all, can I have a copy of your book with your signature? The second one is that the problem I face every time is parity principle. I mean, in 80% is okay everything, but the 20% will get you down, and you cannot do anything about it, and the process will be so hard. And I wanted to ask you, what's your suggestion for these kind of situations?
What kind of situation? You said something about 80-20.
The parity principle. I mean, the 80% of the events is cool and we don't have any problems. But in 20%, you will always face disaster, or I don't know, maybe some little code is wrong and the whole database will get down and you will have a lot of problems. Do you have any suggestions for these kind of problems too?
I will say that apart from team culture, because team culture enforces that people write like good code, people document things, and people enforce what needs to be enforced. I think another thing, and it goes back to what I was talking about, is empowering your SRE teams. The truth is, you would have these problems. There would be those 80-20 situations.
Exactly.
But when you fall into the 20, you also want to make sure that you have enough like your application is well instrumented, meaning that there's telemetry, like you've written logs, there are traces, you have metrics, there are things that you can see to help you say that, okay, I can troubleshoot and figure out why what is happening. And sometimes it might be it might be an annoying thing that fixes the problem. Restarting a VM might be what will fix the problem. And people are spending time figuring out what is not the problem when they could have actually just restarted the VM. So having like applications that are well instrumented is the first step. Because when you think of instrumentation like, let's say you walk into a store and there are no cameras and somebody steals something. How are you going to find out who stole it if there were no security cameras? But if you had security cameras, it means that you are monitoring exactly what's happening at every time during the day. And you can always just go back to check the footage and find who the thief is. So in that same way, when you're thinking about applications, because you would have issues, those 80-20 chances, they would always show up. And sometimes I even think it's more than 20%, to be honest, right? So when you have those issues, you want to make sure that you have enough data to help you figure out where the problem is coming from.
Thank you.
Amazing. Do we have any more questions? Do I see any hands? No. I have a question.
Okay.
Where can we find you next? I love your talk today. Do you plan on doing any more talks for people who want to kind of follow your journey and what you're doing? And what are your plans? Let's answer that question first.
Where will you find me next? I'm in San Francisco in November, I think.
Nice.
But like, I'm on the internet. I live there, like I said, right? So it's easy to find me. Yeah. I'm on the internet, and I'm in San Francisco in November. So that's where you find me next.
And what are your plans for Nexabytes?
Oh, Nexabytes. I mean, Nexabytes is doing good now, thankfully. I hope they stay up. But if any new, cloud transformation or computing thing happens, and they have another problem, we will fix the problem, and my next talk will be about them.
Yeah, so I look forward to that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Okay, great.